Hello, everybody, and welcome to Killer Cafe. I am your host, as always, Spooky. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. Oh my gosh. So, for those of you who really do enjoy like paranormal and spooky stuff or mysteries, then you gotta hop on the Discovery train, like the channel Discovery. Well, I guess they're not Discovery Plus technically because it's a streaming site as well. We get it through our phone, so it's really fun to watch. Anyway, Discovery has some of the wildest TV shows. If you are anything like me and love paranormal, spooky, just crazy things, then you've probably seen like Paranormal Caught on Tape, Skinwalker Ranch, like all of the things. Skinwalker Ranch is technically on the History Channel, but it also does appear on like Discovery Plus and stuff like that. Paranormal, like Caught on Camera, I forget what they're on, but they also have like the Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, stuff like that. Y'all. So I have gone down this rabbit hole of loving the ranches, like the ranch style, like the paranormal ranch style TV shows. So you have obviously Skinwalker Ranch, but there was a new one that recently came like and caught my eye, and that is called The Mystery at Blind Frog Ranch. Now, if you have not heard of it, pretty much it is this ranch that is about 20 miles away from Skinwalker out in Utah in the Uinta Mountains or the Uinta Basin. And this ranch got its name supposedly from the owners, which are Dwayne and Chad Ollinger. And they dug down to try to open up this cavern, and a bunch of frogs came out, and like they weren't moving around, weren't really doing much, and you would have to go up and poke them for them to move, and they realized they were blind. I say allegedly because, again, this is Discovery Channel. I mean, the Discovery Plus streaming services. You never know what's actually true and what's not. But this ranch is actually in the Uinta Mountains or Uinta Basin. It is a 160-acre property. My goodness. They first aired out on like January 1st, 2021. And every single year since, they have 3 seasons now out, they have always done it around the same time. So every year around January 1st. This year they did it kind of early. They started towards like December and then ended in like on January 1st. So, either way, I'm here to recap the seasons because I love this, and I feel like as viewers of my channel, you might too. I know this is not my usual true crime. I'm taking a break right now. I am not mentally healthy, and diving into cases that talk about some gory stuff is just not really up my alley right now. So welcome to Wickedly Weird Wednesday, where we talk about all the paranormal stuff and recap Blind Frog, because your girl loves Blind Frog. I have binged this season so much. Well, I binged it pretty hard, and then I went back and started binging the other seasons, and then I sat there and I was like, I need to talk about this with someone. Because you can talk about it with my husband, but my husband's like, eh. He's very logical, and mind you, right? Discovery has a lot of crazy stuff. Like, they have a plethora of different things. And I'm never saying that this is fully 100% true. I will show you clips of like stuff that is hilarious to me because you know they're hyping it up for the camera. And even most recently from my research, I found out they have a called like Blind Frog Ranch Outpost, something of that nature. It's in Vernal, Utah, where the actual ranch is located, and you know they take tours on the ranch and show people the ranch and like where like some of the places and yada yada yada. If you do look on their subreddit, a lot of people say, oh, they're using stock footage, or you know what they're finding on the ranch isn't actually on the ranch. And yes, for most of the part, you at least just from my own viewing, some of the stuff that they're showing can be tracked to other places around the ranch. But the main reason is, and you see the disclaimer across the screen, I think every time, I don't know. I don't remember for these 2 seasons, or like the first 2 seasons, but I do know in the third one, which is the most recent one I was watching, they have claims of like this stuff isn't like where they're saying it is might be different and like names might be different because they're having a big issue of like poachers and like people who are putting fake claims on the land to try to dig for this supposed gold that's underneath their ranch. It's a whole thing. We will get into it, but first we're going to recap the first 2 seasons. So really quickly before we do get started, Dwayne, Chad, Charlie, I would love to come out to y'all's ranch. Y'all, let me come out there. I would adore it. I would love to get your first-hand accounts of the creepy-ass shit that goes on. Don't get me wrong. It's great. I would love it. I would document everything I could. Like, y'all, hit a girl up, please. Anywho, okay. Grab a coffee, grab a blanket, settle on in, and let's dive on into Mystery at Blind Frog Ranch. First season, or the first episode of season 1, it's called What Lies Beneath. And if you see me looking over here, it's mainly because I have little notes that I took. And sometimes I need bullet points to keep me on track, or I'm going to ramble for like 80 hours like I probably already am. Because we're already, at least for my recording, we're already 6.5 minutes in, and I haven't even started on season 1 yet, or episode 1 yet. But anyway, episode 1 is called What Lies Beneath, and we start off with Dwayne and Chad along with their head of security, Charlie, which talk about the ranch. So they bought the ranch back in 2018. They are Texas boys that have pretty much, well, at least Chad, which is the son of Dwayne, has sold almost everything and moved up to this property. Dwayne is a wildcat guy. He used to drill for oil all the time, but he heard about the property. He heard about the gold that might be possibly underneath, so he decided to buy the ranch. Now, he bought the ranch in 2018, and that's when they started digging. So they were digging around, and everybody's like, what do you want to name it? What do you want to name it? And then that story came out of they were digging a hole down to try to find a cavern, and a bunch of water and frogs just spilled out of this cavern. And, you know, they were poking at the frogs, and they were only moving. Chad and Dwayne have 2 different stories, technically. They're the same thing, but, like, Chad has more detail where he's like, oh, they were albino and blind, and, like, you had to literally go up and bop them, and da-da-da. Where Dwayne, the father, he's more like,
they would just sit there on the edge of the bank, and they wouldn't move until you walked up and touched them on the nose, and they jumped. They had no way of knowing that you were there. I mean, they couldn't see nothing. They asked what we was going to name it, and I said, that's simple. We'll call it Blind Frog Ranch.
So it is up in the Uinta Mountains, and they decided shortly after buying that they were going to connect with one of their people that they know and have a scan done of the ranch. Now, this ranch is 160 acres of land. So, I mean, as someone who doesn't own any land, I guess 160 acres, you need to do a scan. So they scanned it, realized that there's these caverns underneath that they aren't very sure about. So after they did the scan, they realized that the legends of possible old Aztec gold could be a huge thing. So after that, they briefly touch on a few other things. Mainly, they do these little campfire scenes. They stopped doing this in season 2, and I was really sad about it. But they did them in season 1, and I believe in season 3, where they sat together and they kind of just talked or like debriefed the day. But sometimes like things would happen. Other times they would go into like the last little chunk of the episode. But the campfire scenes are really great because it kind of talks through what happened up until that point, and it helps. It helps, I guess, for someone who has horrible ADHD. So they talk about that for a little bit, and it's mainly just talking heads. So the first episode is literally all about what they've been doing up until this point, and they don't say outright what year it is, but based on a few things that I was looking into, and they bought the ranch in like 2018. I had a suspicion that they started filming in 2020, or at least like mid to end of 2020, because their So their season that they have to sit in is mainly from early spring to where there's no snow all the way through to when the first snow hits. So you have to think about like that weird little period of time that they only have to dig. So when they're talking, they aren't ever telling you like what year it is or how long they've been on the ranch. They say, oh, we just started this in 2018. Mind you, the first episode aired on January 1st of 2021. So you have to kind of maybe base it on a few things. They could have filmed in 2019, but Dwayne says a few things like, oh, we were drilling last year and we found some few things that we did. They talk about this, they drilled a hole, and when the water, or before the water spewed out, they shoved this pipe or like PVC type style tubing down to keep the hole open, and they did that the year prior. So at least from my knowledge, I believe they were personally filming in 2020, and then they did, the whole editing process up until the first of 2021. So then they go into all the weird happenings that are on the ranch. How Dwayne has seen a bunch of stuff, Chad has seen a bunch of stuff, there's just odd things going around. And they also start to talk about the fact that they are very close to Skinwalker Ranch.
Skinwalker Ranch is just south of us, 20 miles plus or minus. We're on a strange plot of land that has a lot of stuff going on.
They are only about 20-ish miles, which when you think about it in retrospect, is not a lot. But when you're talking about paranormal happenings, it's very close. Because if you think about these two large ranches that are, major in the paranormal world, especially for the Uinta Basin, it is strange and wild. They are filming a bunch of people who live around that area in Vernal. This one lady, she cracks me up. She, like, any little thing that happens when she's talking to the producer, she's like, welcome to the basin.
Veronica, I'm sorry. This microphone just died. Hang on one sec.
Yep. Welcome to the basin.
The basin got you now. She's just, like, she's my spirit animal, almost in a way. She's really, really cool. So after we get a little introduction to Dwayne and his son Chad, well, Dwayne mainly, then you go into his son Chad, and Chad talks about how he had all these businesses, he sold all these businesses, moved out to Blind Frog to live there, essentially, for a while. He has his wife and his children up there. They are pretty much camping it. They bought a school bus, start camping it. It's a really sweet and touching moment, like, just to see them. But for someone who has seen all the seasons and knows what's going to start to happen, it's almost a little creepy. Because, again, Blind Frog Ranch is some of the most, like, paranormal happenings along with Skinwalker. And supposedly there's skinwalkers walking around this ranch, and you got your kids in a bus. Don't even got them in a house. I mean, like, I don't know if, like, a bus or a house is even going to work out, but anyway, so he pretty much lives there almost all year round. And then we get introduced to Charlie. So Charlie, or affectionately known as Charlie Boy by Dwayne, is the head of security. So he is prior military and security on the ranch. And he's been worked with the sheriff's department for over 20 years before he came out here with Dwayne and started working on the ranch as just head of security. So after you get a full rundown of the main three that you will always see, then you start getting introduced to the people that I would say that's like on their payroll, but people that they really trust and they want to bring in onto the ranch to help them start looking for this gold. So the whole shtick of this ranch is the fact that right back when the Spanish conquistadors came into Mexico, Montezuma was already passed, and his son decided that he didn't want to give the Spanish conquistadors the gold, so he took all the gold, gave it to some of his people, and told them to go up into what is now called Utah. So supposedly, and according to all the legends around this area, there is Aztec gold underneath these mountains or somewhere in these mountains. And it's really interesting to see how these legends kind of have a chokehold on these locals and what they believe is going on, like especially with the skinwalkers and all the paranormal stuff, what they believe is preventing them from ever finding this this gold. After all of that is going on, then you get introduced to a man named Eric Drummond, who is a professional geologist for over 40 years. And mainly they're just introducing him, kind of showing what he's doing, and kind of intermittently showing the pond that they're digging through and trying to get into, and all of that nature. Now, so I have to tell you a quick story because, oh my gosh, I'm embarrassed, like highly embarrassed. So I was doing research for this show and I was digging through a bunch of stuff and I wasn't really sure, like, about what happened to Eric Drummond. So Eric kind of disappeared after season 1, mind you. And many things can happen. Eric was in, I think it's called like Ice Cold Gold from, I think it was like 2010, 2011, up until like 2014, 2015. And then he popped over to Blind Frog Ranch and started working with Dwayne, Chad, and Charlie. But the craziest part of it all is that I'm searching through all these records, trying to find him, because he's very quiet on social media. His Twitter is silent. I tried to find him on Instagram, didn't find him on Instagram. And I'm like looking. And I put his name into Google and I'm like looking through and I see everything of like his Wikipedia page, his IMDb, like all of these things, right? And then I scroll and I find this crazy ass article for a guy of the same name who supposedly killed somebody in 1903 and that the guy killed himself in 2022. And I'm like, oh, please no. Like, I really don't want to go down this rabbit hole of Blind Frog Ranch and find out that one of the people on there went full, like, exorcist mode, where as he was filming this, he was running from the frickin' law. He's fine. He's good. We're all good. He's alive. It wasn't him. He does show up later on in one of the other seasons, or in season 3, and I finally found his Facebook page, and I couldn't find it. Okay, I couldn't find his frickin' Facebook page because this mother trucker decided to be called Ice Cold Gold Eric Drummond. Now explain to me why you would want to be called that. Why don't you just use Eric Drummond? Or like, because not many people know you from Ice Cold Gold. Everybody knows you from Eric Drummond. Because I was looking through all of his little posts, and he made one last post of March 2023, and it was just said, "Goodbye, California." And a lot of people were speculating that he's going back to Blind Frog Ranch. And one of the comments say, "Oh my goodness, are you going back to Blind Frog? Like, that would be so cool." Mind you, he put this in March of 23. So a lot of people speculated that he was going. And when someone put that comment, he liked it. So now, speculation central. Anywho. So the first episode is mainly just the backstory. What's going on the ranch, what has been causing, or what they think has been causing issues, and everything underneath the frickin' sun. It's wild. The first one, I always enjoyed the first episode the most. Because even though it's very, in a way, like, music's super dramatic, got these, like, dark lit, like, talking head moments, it's really cool. Like, you kind of get to know the characters, you get to know the story. Mind you, these people do own it, and I don't know how much is hyped up for the TV show and how much is them just being genuinely excited for certain things. They bought it back before they probably even had a TV show deal. If they didn't, then, that's their own prerogative. He was making bank before he even started Blind Frog Ranch. So that's a whole other thing in itself. But I digress. But that's the end of episode 1. And at the end, they have like intermediate intermediate talking heads and kind of finishing up what they believe will happen for the rest of the season on Blind Frog. All right, team. Let's start with episode 2. So episode 2 is called Submerged Treasure. Now, this one starts off by them ordering a vertical drill. So they decided that instead of trying to dig out this tubing that they had put into the pond that is now flooded, they're going to go like next to it and they're going to fill up the, or not fill up, they're going to vertical drill down and try to get into the cavern another way. Now, I did forget to mention in episode 1, they had this little intermediate spot where they were talking about other dig projects they had started doing at this specific site, which is what they called the pond. And there are a few things that they were talking about. They were talking about one where they had Dwayne dive down into this vertical shaft that they had originally dug to try to see what was going on, and it didn't really work out. He like popped back up. He's like, can't really see. It didn't work. So then they had Chad try, and it semi-worked, but it was so bad and murky that it just wasn't, they weren't able to. And then when they walked away from the pond, it, I think over a couple of days, or so they grab a vertical drill. They decide to drill next to the pond to try to break through this cavern of things, to try to see if they can find another way in, or at least a dry entrance into the cavern. So as they're digging down, they're having a lot of like murky mud and it's starting to get wet, and they're like, oh man, like did we not like move far enough from the pond? Did we hit something? And then finally they get to another dry patch. So they're like, okay, good, it was just the ground. And then they hit something. And the drill guy's like, hey, we're hitting something. It's really hard to get through, like blah, blah, blah. But they keep continuing to drill down to try to get through this rock interface because this drill can. They're going and going and going as they're drilling at night and nothing. So they decide we're going to put a cap in it. We'll come back tomorrow morning, fresh and early, feeling good, feeling fresh. Okay. Then comes the campfire catch up. So this one was more unusual because they're sitting down and talking to Eric, and they're pretty much telling Eric that, hey, weird shit keeps happening on the ranch. If you're going to be here to help us, you need to know what's going on. Now, they don't really get into the specifics of what starts to go on because as they're talking about it, all of a sudden they hear like cows screeching, I guess is the proper word. But the cows are freaking out.
If and when we can do anything.
What was that?
Did you hear that?
Yeah.
It's those cows that are over here.
Yeah.
Something spooked them. I'll go down right here. You want to go around over there?
Go down there. Yep.
Mind you, they don't have cows on the ranch. Like, at all. They do not have cows. Those are their neighbors. So they're running all over this ranch, looking for these cows. They're freaking out. They're like, man, they're super spooked. What's going on? Why are they on our ranch? Da 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 da. And then they come. I will have to. I'm going to insert the clip right before because this makes me so sad. But if you watch Skinwalker Ranch, then you've seen stuff like this before. But they find a dead deer, and the head has been chewed off, and it's missing its internal organs and its sex organs. Like, it's missing everything. Split right through the belly. It's bad news bears. But the way they come upon it is almost more terrifying, I guess you could say, because you're running through this ranch at night. It's 160 acres. You don't know where you're really going other than little flashlights that you're following around, and you come upon this dead deer out of nowhere with no head. It's a little terrifying. Anyway.
That's crazy.
I thought I saw something dart across, though. Look at that. Look at that. Look over there.
Once they finish up with all of this stuff going on, Charlie decides to go into town and start trying to figure out different history points for Blind Frog. He does this for episode 1 as well, but it's very minuscule. It's just more of him being like, hey, we're on Blind Frog, we bought this, what's going on, blah, 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 what are the stories? And I mean, Discovery does it too, and that's why you see the inner clippings of people. For episode 2, though, it's very specific because he goes and finds a guy in town, and he is a Navajo descendant, and he kind of tells him the history of what happened. So then we learn that all the way back, I believe it was like the 1800s or maybe even further, the Navajo were fighting over the land with another indigenous tribe, and the Navajo cursed the land with skinwalkers. So everybody believes that it was just specifically Skinwalker Ranch that was cursed. It was not. It was the entire Uinta Mountains and Basin. So you have to realize that these mountains and basins stretch a very long, like, part of Utah. So when they cursed the land, that's when skinwalkers were released. They even clipped to one of the girls who was talking about how she would come home and see rabbits everywhere and like crows eating like the rabbit parts. And then one night she had windows open and she heard someone like yanking on the door. And she peeks out like the window and she sees this figure that looked human but wasn't walking like a human. And so through this history lesson, the Navajo man was just talking about all different types of things, like what they can do, and that if they're coming out, then you're doing something that's making them mad, and that if you're not careful, then they can hurt you. They're there to harm you, and that's it. Like, they shift into whatever they can, and they will do everything in their power to harm you. So, of course, Charlie, being the head of security, is like, I'm not scared of any skinwalker, but I am nervous about other people, so I guess I gotta up security.
Brings up a lot of concern for our people that we have working out there.
Yes, you need to be very careful.
Yeah.
Very careful.
Okay. Based on what I know now, the main thing is keep everybody safe that's out there, and I've got to ramp up the security a little bit more to take those precautions for that type of scenario that might happen.
This dude, he is the most chill man I have ever watched. He doesn't care about dramatics or the flair. He's like, dang, skinwalkers? Guess I gotta up security. Like, no duh, man. No duh. So, I just find that so funny. So, after all of this, we flip back to Chad and Ryan and Dwayne. Well, Chad, Dwayne, and Charlie, and they're deciding to dig. So everybody manages to open up the hole. They manage to move a bunch more sediment to finally get into this cavern, right? So they go into the cavern and they're digging around and they're like, okay, let's let the sediment settle and then tomorrow we will come back. So they come back the next day and to them, like, water's crystal clear. We're able to dive. So you have Chad and then you have Ryan, which is a cameraman, go diving. He's the underwater cameraman. They say, you two stick together. When one comes up, the other one comes up. Like, y'all don't leave each other, because it is a very dangerous dive. You cannot have any scuba gear on. You have to pretty much go down with your mask and a tube connected to a generator that gives you air. So if your air stops, you're screwed. So they go down, and the entire time, it is such a touching moment, I guess you could say, because you can tell that Dwayne really does love his son, and that, him even doing these is very hard for Dwayne, but it's just a beautiful moment to, like, watch how much he cares, and he's, like, peeking over the edge constantly, and, like, I swear if he could dive into the water and take his place, he would. It was just a really sweet, caring moment as he was talking about him. So then we flip to Chad and Ryan that are diving into this cavern, and they're going deeper and deeper and deeper, and obviously Eric's getting a little bit nervous because he's like, hey, they're going deeper, they're going farther than what we first told them to do. And they come into this tight entrance, and they manage to get in, and it's such a crazy moment because you see Chad poke his head out and, like, wave Ryan in and then go back in, And then Ryan gets in, and all of a sudden you pan up and you just see this massive 10 by 10 wooden box that is underneath this water. It's like a log cabin, but not. It's stacked intermittently, like string wrapped around the edges. It's really crazy. So they're like, it's really cute. Like the most randomest of things, because it's hilarious. I love it. But Chad gets super excited. He's like screaming into his mask because he's so stoked. And they're getting like quick view of everything. Then they come out and they proceed to tell Dwayne, Eric, and Charlie all about it. Like, they're super stoked. They're like, hey, we found the box. Like, we found this box. We're going to have to make a bigger hole. You know, everything. This is so crazy. Like, we have to make a bigger hole. I think we found it. We think we found it, blah, blah, blah. So it's really crazy that they were able to find this. And then that's where episode 2 ends. They do a little sneak preview for the next episode.
Even though he's a hard-headed little, I'm so excited about what Chad did. The best day of your life is when your children become your hero. It's an honor for him to be here for me. It's an honor.
But I hate their little sneak previews. I'll be the pessimist right now. I do hate their sneak previews because they don't always do a sneak preview of the actual episode, next episode. They always do a sneak preview of like what's to come in general. And it irritates me so bad because it's like, for instance, the next episode is called Mormon Gold. And then episode 4 is called Someone Was Here. But yet they, when they did the sneak preview of what's coming, what's next, or like it says next time, and then it shows you like whatever, it's stuff that I know is like a few episodes out. It's not even the next episode. And it's so irritating. Today we are back for episode 3 and 4 of Blind Frog Ranch. Episode 3 called Mormon Gold. And we start off with Chad, Eric, Dwayne, and Charlie all looking over this video from the previous episodes. So the one with the box and them in the tunnels and wading through all this water, right? So they're going over it. They're talking about how amazing it is, but there has to be a dry entrance into this before they flooded it, or if there should be a dry entrance somewhere in these caverns. So Eric, the geologist, decides he wants to dye the water. In his brain, he thinks dyeing the water will help because as the water seeps in and seeps throughout the caverns, it should spread out and go to other places in this ranch and possibly show where there could be other entrances into the ranch and maybe give them a possible place to drill and find a dry entrance to get into these caverns. So they decide to dye this water, and he has this red pigment, and Chad decides to get into the bucket of the excavator that they have, and Dwayne throws him over the water, lowers him down, spreads everything out, and we see the chaos that ensues with them throwing the dye into the water.
Okay, Dwayne, you can stir it up. Yeah! Yeah!
Wow. It's a wave pool, man.
Next step is we go looking around, scanning the area.
So they try to find this dye during the day. They kind of walk all over, well, not all over the ranch. They walk in this majority part of where these creeks and ponds are. They look everywhere for them. They even use a drone to fly over and look, but they're not finding anything. So they decide to switch their tactics and go towards a nighttime excavation, I guess you could say, of these ponds, because in their mind, due to this pigment and the fact that it glows in the darkness with a UV light, they might be able to find it easier with this light.
This is what it'll look like in the water. but we should also be looking on the banks. It's gonna look like that. See that?
It really stands out.
Sure does.
Wow.
So they decide to tramp around in the nighttime, and as they're walking through, they find some footprints. Yeah, they find some footprints, and they're odd. So as they're looking at them, they see the imprint of this footprint, and Eric even comments that it looks like something has secreted as it was stepping. So it's a little odd.
I don't recognize the track at all. It's really strange.
You kind of see the heel and all the way up through to the toes.
Yeah.
It's bigger than any cat or bear that I've seen.
They hear this chaotic noise. I don't even like rewatching these makes me remember like watching them for the first time and how amazing they were. But hearing them back now, like I have like little in-ears, and even hearing it through the in-ears, I could not figure out what this noise is. It's a very odd noise, I guess. Somebody who's better with audio will be able to tell me. But you hear this noise and they all freak because there are mountain lions, wolves, and creatures out there like coyotes that don't play games with humans, right? So they hear this noise, they book it, and I feel so bad for the cameraman because they're booking it up this hill and they're like just trucking. They're like, everybody get out. And they're trucking. And this poor camera guy, he just trips over. It's probably a branch or some kind of type of like scraggly bush because there was a fire previous to them buying the ranch. So a lot of these trees are dead. But yeah, and it feels so bad. And there's this clip of like all of them running up, and one camera guy just pans to the other, and you just see him sprawled out. And I know he's okay now, so like, it's funny now, but like in the moment, I felt so bad. I was like, no, not him, and like nobody, like everybody's obviously running to get away, but oh, I feel so bad.
Oh, did you hear that? Did you hear it?
Let's go. Let's go time. Out.
Get out of here.
This way.
Everyone
Get
out.
out of here. I don't like this.
Everyone, let's get out of here. Let's go.
Headed off.
The road's just right up here, guys.
Right up here. The road here.
What the was that?
So they decide to walk down the road a little bit and keep the lights around them. And earlier in the day, when they were kind of searching everything, they saw that these cedar trees were the only things that were living around this dry brush of trees. So they decided to come back afterwards in the darkness, and they find a teeny trail of this fluorescent dye. And they decide, okay, well, since it's coming from here and it's coming from this area, we're going to drill here and see what we can find here. Because cedar trees, apparently, as they're growing, they will dig their roots down and tap into a water source. So for them, they're like, okay, well, if the cedar trees are growing and they're alive here, and there's this bioluminescent trail, there has to be some sort of water source in this area underneath that we might be able to tap into to figure out where the cavern is going. They flip to the next day where Charlie Boy is out metal detecting in this big area. He loves metal detecting. Chad tells fondly of a story of like, you always see the guy with the metal detector and the sandals and the beads and like kind of the hippie looking guy. That's Charlie. It's a really cute little moment. So Charlie has been up since the crack of dawn, and he's been rummaging around in this area where we will later know it to be called the Bead Cave. And this area, he finds a coin of some sort. So later on, Chad decides to join him, and they hike up back into this cave, and they're looking around, and everything they say is pretty much surface level. So what that means is that they're able to like swipe their metal detector and just cup up the dirt, and there it is. It doesn't really go that deep. So it's pretty crazy when you're watching it, because it's just like, how are things from so late, like so many years ago, just in these tiny little dirt piles, and nobody has seemed to find it yet. But they're digging through and they find, I want to say, like a handful of coins that are all from, I believe it's the 1800s, maybe the 1700s. I'll have to double check. But it's wild. They find just like a handful of coins. And obviously Charlie and Chad are not coin experts, and they do not know. So they decide to take it to a coin expert. While they are doing that, it also flips over back to Dwayne, and Dwayne is with Eric as well, and they are managing to find, or like create, a landing for the rat hole rig. So they managed to make a landing for the rat hole rig, so it can come in and start to drill around where the cedar, and that way they're able to go in and see if they can't find an opening to this cavern. Later on, Charlie and Chad come back and show Dwayne the coins. They decide that they have to get a coin expert in and figure out what's going on, why these coins are here. So Charlie, being the 20-year sheriff department vet, decides he's going to get to the bottom of it. So he takes the coins and decides to go into town to talk to a couple of coin experts about what these possible coins are.
Here's the deal. We need to find an expert that knows about these things. And
Yeah, I'll start on some research on that.
I think this is very interesting. I just don't know why in the world they would be on this ranch.
When he gets there, the coin experts tell him about the story of the Lost Road mines.
I bet you thought these were from the Lost Roads mine.
I'm not a coin collector, so everything I learn is pretty much new.
Your ranch is part of the most famous treasure hunt that's never been solved.
Wow.
All of those gold pieces were actually made from gold that supposedly is in this area. The story goes is that in about 1858, a Mormon leader by the name of Brigham Young sent Thomas Rhodes to befriend the Indians here in the southern slopes of the Uintas. And about 2.5 weeks later, the story goes that as he trotted along, gold nuggets were falling out of his saddlebags. So, and this gold of Thomas Rhodes, it came from Spanish conquistadors from nowadays Mexico City. They were said to enslave the Indians. Eventually, the Indians rebelled, killed their Spanish captors, and they took the gold and hid in it. And people have been looking for it ever since. And that's where the Lost Roads mine is, someplace up in these mountains. And your ranch is in that area.
Pretty much that's how the whole story of the Aztec and the Mormon Gold become one. But it's just so interesting of the story, because it's kind of wild how they figure it all out. Of like, there's these Lost Road mines that you have to follow certain steps in place to find these mines, and you can only see it if you go to certain places at certain times. And he died before he told anybody of where these mines were. So Charlie comes back, talks to Chad and Dwayne, and tells them about the story of the Lost Road mines, and even states that the Indians gave Rhodes up to 60 pounds of gold, and proceeds to say, like, the Aztecs might not have brought up that much. Like, they probably had other mines around that they were able to dig in and dig through and find more gold. So they decide to take it upon themselves to keep looking and try to find them. So we flip on later in where Eric, Dwayne, Chad, Charlie Boy, and the rat hole rig are all at the cedar trees. They are digging down. I think they dig to about 35 feet, and they're finding nothing. There's no entrance. There's no massive, like, cavern that they are hitting. There's not even any moisture to show that where they're finding is where the water is coming from. So they kind of look at each other and say, okay, this has been a loss. We're going to pick it up and move, which sucks, because he says in the beginning, as they're about to start, that drilling this 35-foot deep hole, and I don't even know how big it is. I didn't really pay attention to say how wide it was, but this tiny hole is like $5,000. Their money. I can't complain because it's their money. But like $5,000 to find nothing. And that's like really, I mean, even if they had found a little something, like it's still, you know, a lot of money for that. But $5,000 to find nothing, that kind of sucks. Like a lot. So we go to the next day and Charlie decides to go down to the pond area and start to clean up all of the tools that they had left there. So like he's moving around barrels and generators and all these things, and he looks down and he happens to see translucent worms. They're very odd in color. They're almost translucent and they have black banding around them. They're finding it very intriguing, so he's able to scoop up a few, put them in a jar, and take it over to talk to Dwayne, Chad, and Eric. When he shows them all, they instantly are like, oh, these are like the frogs we saw when we first opened up this little hole and all these albino frogs spilled out. So they know in some way, shape, or form that these animals are coming from somewhere, like they have to find where this possible entrance is. Eric decides to check them out underneath a telescope just to see kind of what they are. And he's able to look underneath and use a UV light and see that they glow.
Oh, look at that. He's a glowworm. We put UV light on them and they glowed a ethereal light blue color.
So that was another odd thing of these worms that were just not usual to this ranch. So they decide together that they need an expert to figure out where, like, what these worms are, where they're coming from. Eric even tries to check to see if there's possible like gold in them or some kind of material in them that might shift or glow underneath UV light. Don't find anything, but they are translucent or like glow and possibly translucent. They look translucent. I mean, for the most part, they just looked like this weird milky white with banding. But anyway, so after they talk about the worms, episode is done. They start with a like upcoming episode and kind of show like all the different things. Obviously, y'all know how I feel about the next time on kind of thing, but it was a really interesting episode. Obviously, there's really cute little fun moments of like mixing up the water and all the like taking Chad over to like throw the dye in and stuff. It was just a pretty, I would call it a filler episode. I feel like these two episodes, 3 and 4, are very big filler episodes, mainly because they just nothing really goes on. Like they find some really cool finds, like obviously the coins. They did test the coins and found out they were fakes. So obviously it's not what they were looking for initially, but what can you do? Episode 4 is called Someone Was Here. So we start off with Chad talking to a biologist and asking him what these types of worms are. So the biologist states that they are horseflies and they are the larvae of the horseflies. So he explains how when the horseflies lay eggs, they lay them in an open area that drop into like tiny caverns of water. And so there has to be an area where these horseflies are laying the eggs and they're falling into this cavern, like this deep, dark cavern, to later get pumped out into what is now the pond. So Chad goes and talks to Dwayne and Charlie and Eric and pretty much states like, hey, these are horseflies. Like the way their patterns are, like they have to be coming from somewhere. And they even talk about how they probably got sucked up when Dwayne was mixing up the water with the dye.
Probably was that vacuum action you were doing, that surging, brought them up to the surface.
Has to be. And I had to put a vacuum on there somehow. I had to.
So it created some kind of vacuum in that pond to yank all of these worms up into the pond for where they later saw them. So Chad and Eric, along with Charlie Boy, all decide to go hunting for a possible entrance and try to follow these horseflies, right? Now, I'm going to put a huge warning because a lot of people will probably get really upset about this. I'm going to show a clip that involves dismemberment of another animal dismemberment too, and I'm trying to show these because it happens on Skinwalker Ranch too, and I think it's very pertinent to what is going on in these episodes. So I'm putting a warning here. I will timestamp it also down below, so if you want to check the description, you're more than welcome. If you do not want to see these carcasses, just skip those parts. All right. I'll put a time code probably around here. If I can't, just check this description down below and I'll put it in print down below. But I think it's important, and I think it's very pertinent to what's going on in these episodes to not include at least a little chunk of a clip in what they're talking about. Okay? Warning. If you don't like it, click somewhere else, click ahead, or move on. It's your choice. So they're trying to find an entrance to this cave, and as they're going up these hills, they find a carcass. And it has no skin on it. It's fairly dismembered, and some of the innards are missing, but it's just laying out in the open. Like vultures haven't even gotten it to it yet to take all the meat. So, and they were even saying that the animals that live out on this ranch, they normally take it back to their den to continue feasting on it, and it's not happening. So there has to be something else going on. And as they're going up to try to find something, they are finding bits and pieces of this animal as well. So they get up and they see this cavern, and it's kind of backfilled in a little bit. So Chad decides that he wants to go in. Now, they're constantly talking about it possibly being a mountain lion den, so they're not fully sure if they want to. But Chad is Chad. Like, that should just be the anthem for him. Chad is Chad. Chad will do whatever he can. He wants to find the gold. He's going to do what he can to find it. So he decides to rig up. He puts on a respirator to prevent him from possible contaminations or diseases that might be from rodents or other animals, and puts on a tie rope to, if he needs to get out quick, they can obviously yank him out. And he also has a CO2 detector on just in case the oxygen decides to disappear. Then he knows and he can get out. So he decides to crawl on in. He's going further in, and he figures out that as he's getting further in, it's getting tighter, but there might be a little drop off towards the end. And as he gets to that drop off, all of a sudden his CO2 meter goes off. Everybody freaks because obviously they can hear it echoing throughout this little den area, and they're like yanking him out. And he's like, "Get me out!" And like they're pushing back, and figuring it all out. They do get him out. Obviously, he's fine. But in like this moment, he's like, it was really dizzy, like I couldn't really focus, and it was very terrifying because you have to realize, like, as they're doing this, they're putting their lives at risk. And mind you, it is television, right? I'm not going to knock the fact that it's television, but some of these cases that I see them do are like these spots where they put themselves. I just sit there and stare for a while because I'm like, is it television or are you actually doing these? And mind you, I would love to talk to anybody who is on these TV shows or like if they can. Obviously, I know sometimes there's a contract where they're not allowed to talk to people, but I would love to sit down with them and ask them certain points in these episodes, like, hey, you were doing this, like, was it actually there? Was it not? Anyway, my little tangents for today. Yay. So they yank him out. He sits down, tries to gain his breath back and everything. And then once they do, they're like, okay, let's go look somewhere else. See if we can't find something else that might show us where a possible entrance could be. So they decide to go hunting. So they're going around the mountains, going up and down, and they manage to climb over these rocks and kind of come down in this little basin area, I guess you could call it. And they look up and they see these petroglyphs.
Oh, look at this. Oh, wow. Look at that.
What do you got?
These huge carvings.
Look at this. These are obviously petroglyphs.
And the petroglyphs are of these massive figures with beautiful headdresses, and like the petroglyphs are amazing, like the way they're done. You can see beadwork of like a necklace, and the petroglyph is standing there. It's a person standing there with their arms, and it almost looks like a world, a sphere, and they kind of have their arms wrapped around it. So it's a little interesting. So they think that it could be of some sort. They're going back and forth of what it possibly could be. One of them mentions Montezuma. It could be Montezuma or something having to do with his gold. And they decide to obviously take pictures, mark the location, and go back and tell Dwayne about it. I have to show this clip. This clip is so funny. So, as I said earlier, I think in my first recap, I love their little campfire scenes. I love them sitting down, kind of recapping what is going on. I feel like it's always midway through the episode, but they're sitting down, they're kind of telling him about the petroglyphs, what's going on, and how these petroglyphs look awesome. And Charlie is talking about how they have this beautiful regalia on. And Chad just goes,
Yeah, I don't know the word regalia, so I'm not going to Those petroglyphs, though, is pretty.
Yeah, that was pretty neat. Yeah.
Yeah, that was good.
But sadly, after the campfire scene, we go to a warning alert, a mutilated buck. So Dwayne goes back up to the pond to start setting up and getting ready for the day, and you hear him call Chad over the phone saying, "Hey, we have another one. You need or Charlie, I'm sorry, not Chad, Charlie." He calls Charlie. He's like, "Hey, you need to get up here. We have another one."
What the?
Charlie boy, you better come up here by the ponds. Looks like we got another one. Copy that. Be there in a minute.
Damn, another one?
Same type of scenario, it looks to me like. Some buck was mutilated.
It's the same damn thing. Ripped the head off.
Kind of makes you wonder if somebody ain't leaving a message here. Where's Chadro at?
I hadn't seen him in a little while.
Hey, Chadro, you better come and look at this by the ponds. Still dripping. Damn sure got some liquid coming out of him.
It was just laying here?
Mm-hmm.
When'd you see it?
I just walked up about a few minutes ago.
God almighty, another one?
They allude to the fact that Skinwalker has had these mutilations starting up about 3 months prior. So they're constantly making these connections back to Skinwalker because they haven't really had mutilations on Blind Frog Ranch, but now they are, and it's in a lot of correlation with Skinwalker. Skinwalker has a mutilation, and then a few months later, they will have a mutilation. So it's a very weird hand-in-hand moment. So they decide to leave the buck there. They're going to set up a trail cam to hopefully catch whatever is going on. So we flip to the next day. They're checking all of the trail cams, and Charlie calls Chad over, and he's like, "Hey, you need to look at this." So they flip it to show the picture, and it looks like this wolf, but it looks like a gangly wolf, like a wolf with really long limbs. And they're talking about, wolves aren't supposed to be out here. They're supposed to be in higher elevations with the other animals that they hunt. Like, this is very unusual for them to be this low to the ground. And Chad states "Oh, hey, did you know that a skinwalker's form that they take is a wolf? It's one of the main ones that they take." And Chad also proceeds to talk about how his young daughter, I think she's 2, he says, proceeds to point up to the top of the mountain constantly and say "Oh, daddy, look at this white wolf," and or white dog, and they'll look up and they won't see anything there. She's like, "Yeah, the white dog, the white dog." So that's a little creepy. Especially when it's your 2-year-old daughter, because My daughter's 1, and I'm terrified of her saying something like that and not being able to see it too. Then we flip. We are constantly in these obviously in these 2 episodes, we're constantly flipping to the locals. But this one particular local, she talks about how she she lives on this.
How would you characterize this area?
This area is a hot spot. And I believe that people need to respect what happens out here.
Piece of property, and her and her husband and her children are. And one day she's seeing this Native American adult kid, someone, roaming around near her fence line and like dancing and doing a bunch of stuff. And so she decides to consult one of her friends who's a shaman. They state that, oh, you need to get them off your property and stop this because they're trying to suck all the good out and give you all the bad by doing this. So she talks to her husband. She's like, we need to figure this out. I don't know what's going on. And then later on, she begins to see a wolf of some sort, or she calls it a white dog. But I mean, at this point, it's a wolf in my brain. So it starts walking the same fence line. It says that they come from the same area, but she either sees the wolf or the native. She doesn't see anybody else that goes on that. And then one day she says the wolf manages to get within her property line. She's getting really confused and upset, and she just doesn't know what to do. Well, one day she peeks out the window and she sees that all of her horses that she has are like butt to butt, freaking out. And she sees that the wolf is creeping up towards them. So she proceeds to grab her shotgun off the wall and go out. And she's like, I had 1 bullet, so I knew I had to hit him square. So she goes, shoots him, kills him dead. Supposedly, he just dropped. So she's like, okay, well, he's done. Calls her husband, says, hey, when you get home, can you please go get the wolf that's in the pen and get rid of it? Husband comes home, nothing's there. No bullet, no blood, no body, nothing. And then she says that later on, she wants to say like, I think it's like 2 or 3 days later, in the newspaper, a Native child had died at his home of a gunshot wound. And she's like, I knew it. It was a skinwalker. And I'm like, okay. Might have been a coincidence, but they keep saying like, you just don't mess with whatever's out here. You try to respect it as much as possible, try not to mess with it as much as possible, and just live in cohabitation, apparently. So we flip tonight, and Chad decides to walk around and try to find a possible cave. He's very determined to find these caves. He's like, we found these coins, we found the trickle by the cedar, we have to be able to find this cave. So he decides to go to the opposite side of where the pond is and start looking around. They look for a while, and he decides to sit down with the camera person that's with him, and he's just like, hey man, I'm sorry for keeping you up so late. We're not really finding anything. Let's just head back. We're done. I can't find anything. Let's head back. So as they're heading back, obviously they're scanning everything just to make sure, and Chad happens upon a cave. So he's instantly like, there's a cave, and it goes pretty deep. We have to call everybody. So he instantly calls Dwayne, Charlie, and Eric, and they're like, hey, bring hard hats, lights, there's a cave, we got to get in there. So everybody shows up, have a grand old little party, and decide to go in and see how far it goes back. So as they're going in, they notice the fact that it's handmade, it has not been blasted. There are markings in there of being handmade, because normally you'll see little blast caps everywhere that they can all shove in and explode, and they're not seeing any of that. So they continue back, and as they get back there, they notice that it just ends. It doesn't really go anywhere, doesn't dip down, doesn't go anywhere, it just ends. And they're commenting on the fact that it's opposite of where the pond was. So they have this theory that someone was trying to get into the caverns, but through a different way from where they were, and they just kind of stopped halfway through the mountain and decided not to keep going to the caverns, whatever that may be. There's also a cute moment with a bat, and I'll insert it here because it's just funny.
Watch it. Get out! It ends up bag he's found. He's going after. Let's get out. I'm gonna get the out of here.
He likes you, doesn't he?
Yeah, he likes me. You guys act like
He's up
gonna
on the
kill you.
ceiling now.
He's in my face. That ain't funny, man.
Well, I kind of thought it was.
So we flip to the next day, and Chad talks about how having so much acreage is really difficult because going out and being able to scan is very hard, but they try. And he talks about how you will miss animals that have been killed or died or whatever, and you'll happen upon their bones later on. But he talks about how this particular site that he has found is just a pile of cow bones. He's like, normally you'll see them either scatter around due to vultures or due to the predators ripping them apart for the meat. But it almost looked like whatever happened to the cow happened and nothing wanted to touch it at all. So they obviously just kind of died and disintegrated right there. And he talks about how, like, he had a friend come out and look at it. And he's like, yeah, this looks a lot like what happens over on Skinwalker, where they will have cows die all the time and no predators will touch them. And so it's very just odd for them and they don't really know what to do. So they kind of go back and forth. And I think it's a very interesting point because this is the first time heavily that they're connecting themselves to Skinwalker. And mind you, like I said in the previous recap, they're about 20 miles away. So it's a very close quarters, but not close quarters moment. And to see the similarities between the two is very intriguing in my eyes, because if you think about the fact, if the Skinwalkers are real, then they're having a big issue with the fact that there are probably multiple Skinwalkers walking around and terrorizing not only are these two specific ranches, but all of the locals in between and in these cities around these two ranches. So we flip then to Charlie showing up and asking, I believe he's at like a courthouse or something, but he's asking for the county records of Blind Frog Ranch. So they're digging through the county records to see if these petroglyphs possibly show an Indian burial ground, because if that happens, then they have to obviously stop digging, section off that area that is an Indian burial ground, and release it to the Indians. They don't want to, or the natives, they don't want to keep continuous digging. They want to make sure everything's all good before they move forward with any more digging. So they look, and around the time that they think the petroglyphs were possibly done, it's American federal ground. So they don't have to worry about that. So, because he even specifically asks, he's like, would there possibly be any type of native burial ground? She said that they don't have tribe records, so they can't fully show anything, but it was American federal ground at the time that he's looking. So he also asks if there's any claims on this particular land, because of obviously finding this cave, but it now looks like a digged out piece of cave of something. They want to make sure that if there was any claims, they kind of know about it so they can start looking around for mines of some particular sort. And as they're flipping through this, he pops up and it scrolls down, and lo and behold,
What's up, Charlie boy?
Hey, you guys are not going to believe this.
What is it, Charlie?
I found 2 mining claims on the property.
Charlie, don't be us.
And guess whose name was on the claims? Rhodes.
The claims of the mines are from Mr. Rhodes himself. So their property, obviously, that is a part of this big lost Rhodes mine treasure, is smack dab in the middle of it, because the mine claims on this property are from Mr. Rhodes himself. So Charlie starts to drive back. He proceeds to call Chad because Dwayne's not answering phone, because he decides to be in his little wildcat and, do his thing. So Chad signals to his father. Dwayne comes down. They're having a conversation, and all of a sudden Dwayne goes,
That's huge, Charlie. Get your ass back here.
it's just so funny. And then that's where the episode ends. The next time on Blind Frog Ranch,
they have a lot of, so I'm going to give you like a little sneak peek into the next few seasons, right? So they're having a lot of issues, not only with poachers or of that sort, but they're also having issues of people claiming that part of their property is theirs. Now, as somebody who does not own property, I can't tell you much, right? I can tell you to get a surveyor and to mark off the area that's actually yours and move on. But for 160 acres, that might be a lot to do. I mean, but surveyors do it all the time, so I don't know. But like next time, or at least in the upcoming episodes, you have a lot of people coming onto their property stating it's theirs when it's actually Dwayne's, or I don't know. There's a very blurry line because they're also around BLM land as well. So a lot of this land as well is not owned by anyone. It's just federal land. So we're seeing this issue come up where either people are trying to claim it as theirs, like their neighbors. People are trying to do mining claims saying that, oh, like we got permission from X, Y, and Z when it's forged. Or we're seeing people who just come through the middle of the night and do whatever the fuck they want. So it's interesting because, like, obviously this is a huge plot point coming up now for these next few seasons. Like, I don't remember much about season 2, all that much. But I know, like, with me binging recently season 3, it's a huge plot point in season 3 of people constantly coming onto their land and screwing up so much and causing so much chaos. Obviously, it gets pretty heated for most parts of people trying to claim land as that it's not theirs. But as someone like me, I'm just like, get surveyors. Get surveyors, block off the area that's yours, and move on. But that's just me too, so I don't know. A little nervous about the next coming episodes because if I think the next few episodes are coming up, it's a really sad topic, and it makes me sad thinking about it. But I hope it's not. I think it's coming up in season 2. It might not be a season 2. I don't know. Anywho.
Episode 5, which is called Trespassers. They start off obviously with a recap from last week, just kind of telling the story of what's going on. And then finally, Eric goes out up into the mountains and starts to look at one of his maps. I think he calls it a topography map. I'm not sure. I'll have to double check. And he just sees that he has an anomaly where everything looks flat, but when he looks up, there's obviously a big mountain or a big divot in this basin that he is up upon. Upon finding that out, he goes down and talks to Dwayne and Chad, and they decide to go up there and check it out themselves. So Eric takes up Dwayne and Chad, and they're looking around, and they decide that they're going to dig there, because if it was such a big anomaly enough for them to hide the topography, or to hide this in the topography map and not show it, then there must be something important underneath. So they decide to go grab a drill rig and decide to drill on into it. And obviously they're excited, they're stoked, they're gonna dig on in. As always, it's not very smooth sailing for them, because the drill rig manages to hit the rock bed as they're digging in. Because obviously it's a part of a mountain, there is tons of rock bed, and all of a sudden it just peers through and goes on in. So they think that they have finally managed to hit this cavern. And as they're going in, the drill doesn't even need to spin anymore. They just keep on pushing through, and they're super stoked because they finally think that they've hit a dry entrance into this cavern that they've been trying to get into since the very beginning of this season, right? So as they do that, all of a sudden the drill breaks. Something happens where either something malfunctions or breaks on the actual drill itself. Have to stop drilling. So as they stop drilling, Charlie Boy decides to take his metal detector and start sweeping the area around this site to see if he can't find anything else while they're digging. Because mind you, they have found a multitude of different things throughout this season that have kind of shown them where to go for the digging and drilling. So as he's going through, his metal detector hits a point, and they're super stoked. So they call everybody over because they think that they found something that's very interesting. Only to find out that their drill bit didn't go into a cavern. It skidded up the rock bed and through the topsoil, and that's what they found.
Another rock.
No, it ain't a rock.
Oh, hell.
What the hell? It's a drill stem.
Yeah, it is.
So unfortunately, it was not what they originally wanted, obviously, but they realized, like, okay, we're not getting in it this way. We have to figure out a different way. So they decide to bring in a GPR data team. Now, this data team is consistent of 2 people. They come out to the ranch and obviously meet Dwayne and Eric and everybody. And Eric is kind of spearheading this GPR sweep. So they decide 3 different points to hit at. One of them is the energy zone. One is above on the anomaly from the topography graph or map. And the other one is the original dig site. So they manage to go through each site and they get to the energy zone. When they get to the energy zone, they realize as they're going through that something is just not right. It's almost as if a steel plate about 4 feet down is causing their device to malfunction. And both of the men say they've never seen this before. It's a very weird anomaly. And normally you would see this in a city, not somewhere up in the mountains where you don't have a electric grid around you.
Way out here in the middle of nowhere, I wouldn't expect to see anything interfering. Something highly reflective, not a sandstone bedrock that you see right here.
So we flashed then into the night and they show this anomaly because these GPRs go about 50 to 60 feet down and they had no other issue other than in this specific energy zone. So they don't really know what to do. Everything's going wild. So they decide then and there that the next day they're going to go grab the track hoe and they're going to dig in that spot and see if they can't find whatever this anomaly was. So the next day they flash forward in, start digging, and find absolutely nothing. Now, mind you, right? this show has had a multitude of crazy instances that make 0 sense to them, right? Like they've had weird occurrences happening and they've had all these weird anomalies happen. And it almost seems like it's a surprise to them when this happens in the energy zone. But then Dwayne goes and says like, oh, it happens all the time in this area because everything breaks and things just glitch out. And Dwayne was hoping that it was gold that was like flashing up, but it wasn't. It was nothing. And they have no idea why this even happened. They even grab a metal detector, Eric does, and hops in the hole and scans the hole because he's like, there is an anomaly on this machine. There has to be something wrong with it. But nothing is found. And they're just so confused on why this is. So he hops out of the hole, tells Dwayne, hey, we can backfill it. There's nothing here. We don't know. Unless you want to dig deeper, there's nothing here. So they proceed to backfill this hole. Now, obviously, with the episode 5 being called Trespassers, we're not going to get through an episode without something going awry, correct? So as they're doing this, all of a sudden, Dwayne stops and hears this humming noise, this buzzing noise, and they look up and they see a drone. So they instantly ask everybody. Like Dwayne immediately radios Charlie Boy, says, hey, are the cameramen, are they flying a drone right now? Is that one of ours? And Charlie Boy asks, and the producers are like, no, that's not ours. We don't know what this is. So they immediately snap into action to try to get their drone off of the ground so they can pinpoint whatever drone that was. Now, as they're doing this, obviously, Dwayne's keeping an eye on the drone, trying to make sure. He keeps saying, like, it must be someone spying on us. This happens all the time. And they book out, like, the drone books out mind you, by then, the producers have theirs ready to go. So as they see the drone book out, they're like, hey, just flip it. We're gonna launch it. We're going. So they go launch this drone, and the drone starts to malfunction. Like, the controller itself is malfunctioning. They have zero idea what is happening. You hear the producer getting, like, pissed off and cussing because he's like, why is this not communicating with the drone? And as they go fly it off, it kind of tempers a little bit and lands, and then they try to do it again, and it goes and manages to flip and almost break. So they look again. They see the drone fly off. Dwayne obviously has his little headcanon moment where he's like, we've had a lot of these. We have no idea how far away this drone talks to whomever, but they're watching us. Like, people are watching us and we know. So it's just a whole thing where they're like, we know there's a drone here. We know something's going on. Like, we have to figure out who's watching us and why. And of course, as he's stepping out of the track hoe to try to figure out what's going on, a producer runs up and he's like, hey, Dwayne, there's somebody riding around on your property on a 4-wheeler.
Dwayne, somebody's on your property, riding around on a 4-wheeler.
So, mind you, though, this is a 160-acre ranch, and they do not have fences. As far as I know, they do not have fences. They have fences on the main roads themselves, and I believe they have fences near, like, other ranchers' property, mainly just to, like, have a deviation of, like, where their ends and their neighbors' starts. But other than that, I know they also parallel a bunch of BLM land that a lot of the other ranchers use for cattle grazing. So I don't think they have any real fencing up around that area. Personally think they should, but I don't own 160 acres, so I don't know how hard that is. So Dwayne takes off with Charlie Boy, and they show up, and it's supposedly a neighbor. And he's talking about how he's trying to find his cows, that his cows have wandered off. And recently, he's counted them, and he's noticed that 4 have went missing within the past year. And he wants to be able to go on this ranch and look for his cows, because he thinks that the cows have disappeared in a shaft of some sort. Dwayne continues to tell him, like, hey, we're not doing anything on this ranch. Your cows have not disappeared down this shaft. They probably just went off somewhere and died because they weren't able to get back. Mind you, the entire time, the producers are there, the cameras are there, and they're almost like arguing back and forth because the guy keeps bringing up the gold, and he's like, oh no, like, there's no gold on here. We're not doing anything. No. And he's like, why are there cameramen here? Like, why are you going to be on TV? Are we going to be on TV? And Dwayne just keeps pushing him off, saying, hey, I would really appreciate it if you get off my land. And the guy proceeds to take a phone out and take photos and videos of all the people and put it back in his pocket. Now, mind you, I do not know Utah law. I know there are some laws in some states that state you cannot video or record anybody without their permission. Explicit permission stating, yes, I understand X, Y, and Z is recorded. I give my consent, or, whatever that may be, to show that you understand that this is possibly being recorded and that you understand that you are possibly being a part of that recording. So he takes the photos, puts it back in his pocket. Dwayne's like, I don't play this game. You need to take that out and erase it. And the guy gets started to leave. He's like, well, if I can't go look, I'm going to talk to the BLM manager. And he's like, go ahead, but it's private property. You're not going to win. Like, if it wasn't private property, then I'd say, yeah, go right ahead, go talk to the BLM manager, but it's private property. And you need to erase those those photos or whatever you had just taken, you need to erase it. And the guy refuses on those.
Talk to the BLM ranger, I don't know what to do.
Well, you're more than welcome to talk to him, but this is private property.
Yeah.
So he continuously says, hey, I don't play this game. Like, we can play this game, but I don't. I'll win. Like, I'm going to fight you on it. Which they're Texas boys. Like, obviously they don't play certain games, they don't do certain things, but at the same time too, it's Utah. I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's just a wild thing. So he finally takes out his phone, erases it, and takes off. Dwayne just pretty much states, like, yeah, we know there's trespassers. There's people on here all the time trying to look for the gold, but they're not going to win. They want to know what's going on, but they're not going to win. And mind you, right, this is a weird moment because they want to keep things private, right? And they want to do everything within a certain parameter or certain secret. But they're on TV. Now, mind you, yes, when this was first happening on season 1, they were not on TV yet. But they're on TV now. So stating that you want to keep things secret about this dig for gold, yes, I understand it is a very big parameter. And I know now that a lot of the areas that they were talking about are not the areas that they said they were. But again, you're on TV talking about it. I just don't know. Like, can't keep secret for very much long, buddy. Can't keep a secret for very much longer. So after all of this, we flip to Charlie walking around at night and deciding that they're going to be putting up a lot more cameras around certain areas where they know there could be possibly more foot traffic through their property, or at least entrances that are easier to get into. So they put a couple on a creek area, and they put a few more where he considers it a choke point where a lot of people will go in and out of this specific area. And he even says that a lot of people are very intrigued and interested because they're a lot like Skinwalker Ranch. They've had a lot of issues go on. They've had a lot of investigations. Obviously, with how publicized Skinwalker Ranch is and with how infamous, I guess it is. The town itself, I believe, is very small. I have not looked up this town. I probably should. But this town is fairly small. So you have to realize when you see people coming through constantly going up to either Blind Frog or Skinwalker, it can be a huge deal for the town. And how, over these years, you've had military personnel over on Skinwalker, most likely Blind Frog as well. And there's been tons of reports and investigations about both of these ranches and having these issues. So, of course, you're going to have people super curious and want to come on and see what's going on. I don't think it's right, especially if it is private property, but people are going to do it. It's just like people going into abandoned hospitals or all these different places that are abandoned and technically off limits because people do own these properties. People still do it because they find it interesting and they want to go look, even though it is technically illegal. It is part of having not only that much acreage, but also having the stigma of what their ranch is and what has happened on their ranch. So finally, you get it where everybody sits down and they're talking, specifically Dwayne is talking about the energy zone and how everything goes wrong in the energy zone, from equipment glitching out and breaking to phones not working or specific electronics not working. And he proceeds to tell the story of his necklace and how in the beginning they were going around and they heated up some sort of sand of some kind, or at least he said there was something in his crucible. He found it dirty after they had done something, and he smacked the crucible and a chunk of metal came out instead of sand or dirt or something of that nature. And they decided to tell Eric, and Eric asked if they can show him what has happened or like what does happen. So they do. They grab sand, they sift it, they go through the whole process, throw it in the crucible, heat it up, and dump it in. And once it cools, they dump it out, and it's a triangle of metal. And Eric is just so confused. To see his brain like fritz out.
Question is, I just don't know. I shouldn't say that. I'm not gonna. That's crazy. It's just very weird. I don't see how that can happen.
And I don't know, again, I don't know if they play it up for the cameras. I don't know if this is a genuine reaction. I mean, for me, as someone who is just watching this as a viewer, it's very odd. It's alchemy. It has to be alchemy in some sort of way. But Eric is a scientist. He doesn't believe in alchemy. So he doesn't know what this is, right? So he asks if he can take this metal and run some tests on it. And they say, sure, go right ahead. Break it up, do whatever you want, test it out, and tell us what you find. So he, the next day, decides to run a few tests. He breaks up the metal, breaks it apart, looks into it, and he notices not only is it blue in color, but it's also just silver. Because they take out this XRF gun and they shoot it and they notice that it's silver. There is no reason for this to be silver. There was no metal that they could tell from sifting in this sand, and it has turned into a solid silver piece. So they sit down with everybody. Eric tells Dwayne about this and how it's silver and blah, blah, blah. But Dwayne's not really for it. Dwayne expresses the fact that gold is, I think, like $1,800 an ounce, while silver is $20 to $24 an ounce. He doesn't want to focus on the silver. He wants to find the gold, which is very fair. He brought Eric out for the specific purpose of trying to find this gold, of finding the natural minerals around this town, to find a denser mineral, to find gold. Eric is so discombobulated over the fact that he watched sand become silver. He wants to focus on that. And he asked to test it again, but get it from 12 different areas around the ranch. And again, Dwayne does really oppose this, but he also starts to say something, and Charlie walks in and interrupts and decides to show a video that was caught by the creek that we saw in the previous scene, or 2 scenes ago, where he was putting up the cameras. Now, there's a lot of speculation, I guess you could call it, around this specific video. I am not the person to say if it's real or not. I don't know. I don't know them. I don't have communications with them. I can't ask them. Ryan, who was in season 3, he commented on one of the videos. Hi, Ryan, if you're watching this. But he's never gotten back to me about the fact of, like, talking with him. So I don't have any knowledge of this. But across all of the Reddits, they're saying, oh, it's fake. It's really dramatized. It's really this. It's really that. But we don't know, right? We're not privy to this knowledge. So Charlie walks in and shows this video, and it's of this guy, and I don't even know how to really describe it, but it looks almost like he's being pulled by a string of some sort, like from his chest. He's just being like yanked right up. His like back is arching. He's like in the He's being pulled up by a string and making these weird ass noises. Obviously, they're very concerned. And Charlie even says,
this is a skinwalker.
For many people, that probably would be a skinwalker. That's very concerning. That's very scary. You don't know what that person is doing. And all of a sudden, they're acting wild. And mind you, you don't know if he has a mental diagnosis, obviously, or if it is a skinwalker, or if it's someone just knowing the camera's there and wanting to fuck around and make them concerned. But it's very terrifying to see. And as we're sitting there and watching Eric and Dwayne watch this, he tells them it's on Moore Creek, which, I mean, is nothing to us as the viewer. But for Dwayne, he realizes that Chad's family is right there, close by, in their bus. And Chad's not with them. Nobody is. It's just his wife and his children. They like are staring at each other like, oh crap, this is by Chad's family. And Chad walks in and you hear one of the producers going, man, you're gonna freak. And he's like laughing kind of because he's like, what are you talking about? And he sees the video and he's like, that's by your family. And Chad goes, I need to call my wife. Like, what the heck? Tries to call, can't get through to her, which again, don't know if it's hammed up for the TV or if this is genuine, but I honestly believe it is genuine because he freaks. He's like, I gotta go, see them. And he hops in his 4-wheeler and peels out. And that's where they end. That's where they end the episode.
The whole family's out there. I gotta go.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
And obviously, like, they're like, next time. And you show them scavenging through, like, screaming, trying to figure out where this guy is. But it is a genuine scary moment, because if you want to believe that whatever happening is real and there is a possible skinwalker on their ranch at this specific moment near Chad's family, he has little kids. I believe his youngest daughter is probably 1 or 2. And mind you, my daughter is 1. So if I see that video and I know my 1-year-old is like probably a few yards away from whatever's going on in those trees, I'd freak too. I wouldn't know if it's fake or not. I would hope it's fake, but the way the reaction was, it's very scary and seems very genuine. And that's where they end episode 5. Episode 6 is called Answers. It starts off obviously where we picked it back up from episode 5, where Chad bolts off into the evening to go check on his family and to see what's going on with this supposed skinwalker. Now, the producers are also saying, hey, grab your stuff. We got to catch up with Chad. Let's go. So they take off as well. They go in their little side-by-sides and sprint off into the night. Once they get there, they verify with Chad that the family is okay. Everyone is fine. But they have to find out where this person is, if this is an actual person, if they're still on the property at all. So everyone does start splitting up. They're starting walking around, looking, and they realize they're not really covering much area. So they come back together, and Charlie decides to split everyone off properly. So Charlie and Chad take the woods. Dwayne does the side-by-side, and I believe that Eric stays up on the road to watch just in case something does come around. So they're all splitting off, verifying, checking around, trying to make sure everything's okay, hollering into the night, trying to suss this person out, but they don't find anything.
Get my hands on him. What's that over there? Hey! Hey! What? She's out of here.
The trees are very dense in that area, and even when they get down to the creek where the camera was, there's no one. And Charlie even says that there's like no footprints, no tire marks, nothing. And they can't see him, so they obviously aren't sure where he went. So they decide, all right, let's just pack up for the night and head on back to our respective cabins. And as they're walking away, everybody pretty much agrees that, yeah, it was a skinwalker. It has to be a skinwalker for it to disappear so quickly. Then we start flashing towards different residents of the town talking about the skinwalkers. A lot of them are saying how the cows are mutilated, or they might follow you home if you're not careful. Other people say that there are people in the town who have seen people shift into coyotes or wolves of that creature. And the final woman is just pretty much stating how if you're not careful and you catch them, they could follow you home and torment you. We then flash to Dwayne talking about how he put in a large amount of money into this project and he really wants to get his return from it. The issues, though, is that every time they think they're getting close, weird occurrences start to happen around the ranch, whether it be electronic, machinery, even weird sightings like they're having now. He's not really sure what's going on. He wants to get to the bottom of it, But he also says that him being the boss, even though the weird occurrences are happening, he needs to shift everybody's priorities from the weird occurrences back to the gold. So we then see that they're trying to find better targets to start digging with the rat hole rig. They're not really sure where to go, but they decide to go back up to the unmarked fault zone and decide to do some testing around there to see if they can't find a cavern.
Exactly where to drill into it. So what we're doing here is called resistivity testing.
They take these little probes, they mark them out, and they send a current through the two steel probes to see if there's a cavern. The higher the number, the bigger the cavern, and so on and so forth. As they're looking through, they realize that with the bedrock, they're not probably able to get down as deep as they want. But Chad shows Eric that they have this prior, I want to say it's like a prior drill bit or rig of some kind that had broken off in the bedrock, and they believe that it is in a cavern. So they hook the controls up to that to test for the spot. They take one part and connect it to the rig that is inside of a supposed cavern, and then they also take it and attach it to another steel stake that is further down, and they send a charge through. Well, Charlie says that it was 18.86, and Chad and Eric walk up. Chad's like really mad about it, so he walks up and he decides to look at it as well, and realizes that there's no decimal.
That's not... There's no period on there.
Oh, really?
Hey, come look at this, Eric.
What you got?
Look at this. It's 1800.
Oh, wow.
It's 1886. So they think they have a cavern on their hands. This is a very, very high number. This is astronomical. Eric gets super excited because he realizes that there's a possible cavern and they might have just found their dry entrance. So they go tell Dwayne, and he says, okay, you found a spot to dig. You found a possible cavern. I'll get that rat hole rig out there and we'll start going. So as they're digging, they're looking for two specific things. They're looking for a deviation in the type of soil, but they're also looking for a pressure with this rig. So as they're pushing down into the rig, they're supposed to almost feel this pressure release as they hit the cavern. And that's what they're hoping for. So as they're going, they're starting to see a mixture of dry and wet. And showing water to them, they get very excited because it might show the Aztec system that they were using, where if you hit a certain thing and then it just floods out. So they're fairly certain they found the entrance. But they know that once they do find the cavern, that it will have no resistance. So they continue digging. Fortunately, though, like everything else that they get sucked into, they dig deeper and deeper and deeper, and they start to realize at the 30-foot mark, which is where they think the cavern is at, the man operating the rat hole rig says he's having to put more pressure instead of less. And that makes them realize that they're hitting clay. And Eric proceeds to say that sometimes, instead of showing a cavern, this testing that they did with clay especially can misread. And instead of finding a cavern, it could be something else entirely, like the clay. We then flash to them sitting in front of the cabin talking about how the season is coming to an end. The snow is starting to fall, and soon it is going to rain down on them. So they're trying to decide together where to dig the last hole for the season. And as they're going back and forth, Dwayne decides he's going to go around the circle and ask each person where they think that their last dig should be. So he starts with Chad. And Chad states that they should go to the energy zone. There have been many different occurrences. They are not sure what is going on there. They can make sand into metal, and they want, or at least he wants, to see what's going on there. If there is something in there, if there's a cavern, anything of the nature. He wants to figure out what's going on. After he says that, Charlie says the same thing. He says, I agree with Chad. I think it's the best decision for us. And Eric chimes in as well and said, yeah, the energy zone is where we should probably go. So with them all in agreement, they decide to grab the rat hole, go over to the energy zone, and they decide to dig there. So they go all the way to the end of the drill bit at 85 feet, and they find nothing. So obviously, Dwayne's a little upset. You know, he keeps saying how every time we try, we miss, and I'm not sure what's going on, but we have to figure out what's going on. There has to be something that is happening in the energy zone.
So far, we missed on all the targets that we drilled in.
It's frustrating, but I'll tell you what, there's something going on here that's creating a huge energy zone, and come hell or high water, we will get to the bottom of it.
So they decide they're going to create a pulley system with scrapers along the side. Now, Dwayne is a engineering genius, I swear. The way he built this scraper is so crazy. So the way it works is it is a like four-cornered pulley system. So it's a circle, and it has four little corners that are edged that have scrapers attached to them, and then obviously they come to the point for the pulleys. So the base is for collecting samples, and the scrapers will lay flat against the edges, and as it goes down, and once they decide to pull it up, they will deploy the scrapers out, and they will scrape up along the 85 feet to get all the samples they possibly can. This is a crazy thing, but he does it so beautifully. Like, they're really hoping to find samples, but they're also hoping to find gold. He really wants to find if there's any type of gold in this ground or in this energy zone, and might possibly explain why they're having these weird energy fluctuations. So they come out together at night, they drop down the scraper, deploy the scrapes, and start coming back up. They do stop about 80 to 83 feet. I don't think they go all the way down. And it does get caught.
Duck. Too tight, Chad.
Let her down.
They are able to, thankfully, unstick it. But it's just so funny because Dwayne even says as they're doing it, he goes, obviously, when everything's running smoothly, we have to have something go wrong. It can't ever go perfect. We always have to have one issue happen when it's in the energy zone. Nothing can ever go right.
It seems like every time we make some progress, something else steps up and starts fighting us.
So they pull it up and they start to notice that the samples aren't normal brown samples. They're blue. And as they're looking at it, Eric says that it's very rare. Like, this is not a normal occurrence. And he even says that it might be iridium, but they aren't sure. So he decides what he's going to do is he's going to go around and go throughout the property with Chad and check other places for possible iridium on the property. Because if they're finding other iridium on the property, then this will show that there is a possible iridium deposit on this property in the energy zone specifically, and could be causing a lot of these issues. So they go around, and as they're going, they go up to an old creek and they find chunks of meteorite. And Eric goes on to say that because of finding these chunks of meteorite, then that means there's a high probability of iridium, because iridium is attached to meteorites. Later on, Eric decides to head up to the mountains and up on a stream to gain more samples, because he wants to have multiple samples from different areas on the property. As he's doing so, though, all of a sudden, a thunderstorm rolls in. And Eric, I mean, it's kind of comical because Eric's like, of course I would have to be up on a mountain with a shovel in the middle of a thunderstorm. So he starts hiking down, trying to get out there. Thankfully, he doesn't get hurt. He does fall. And you like see it with the camera that he falls, and he's like, oh man, I got blood on me. It's like, yeah, dude, you just fell. Of course you have blood on you.
There's blood all over.
as that is all happening, we flip to Charlie Boy, and he explains how the ranch will randomly send thunderstorms or any type of weather to always mess up plans. It's like the land knows and is not willing to give up its secrets. Then later on the next day, Eric and Chad come together to start going through each sample bag to see what they can find. So they have one from the hole, one from the creek, and another from up in the mountains. And they want to see if there's any iridium in any of the samples. So they do make a water sift. They throw it in the samples. And Eric goes to say that having the water turn certain colors is a very good sign, especially if it's like a muddy, reddy brown, because that means there's an iron deposit and iridium is attracted to iron. So they start to pan for this iridium, and the only iridium they do, or possible iridium they do find, is in obviously the pan that was from the scraping exhibition that they did the previous night. So Eric then goes on to talk about how when the meteorite came through that killed the dinosaurs, it shot iridium up into the atmosphere and fell down. So there's a possibility that because this meteorite happened in, I believe, Mexico, there's a high probability that there's a high concentration of iridium in this area due to how close it is to Mexico. They find these blue little flakes and they decide to test them because they want to see what it actually is. They decide to test them with the XRF gun, and it shoots up wildly. It's at, like, he said that if we're at like 50 or 60 parts per million, like, it'll be fine, it'll be great, like, we can make a good money off of this. It shoots all the way up to over 800,000 parts per million.
Come on, iridium.
Hey,
50.
That's 50 parts per million?
61.
Yeah, let's
So
go.
it's still running.
Oh,
it's still running. It's going up.
97.
80 parts per million. Oh my. The early stages of the process, it's coming up 80 parts per million. We've got iridium, guys. That was significant in itself. If it had ended at that point, I would have been very happy. This is the full scan here. This is the final. Oh, 804,000? And those specks are pure iridium.
It jumped up to 800,000. Like, what?
Now, that's a lot, and it's wild. So all of them get super stoked. Charlie Boy, Eric, and Chad are all pretty excited. Dwayne doesn't show much emotion, which is always funny to me. I love it. But he even states he's not giving up on the caves. He's not going to give up on the box. He's not going to give up on the gold. But this could be a very lucrative business if they do find a very good iridium deposit mine. And it would probably help to push them forward in the search for whatever is going on this land with the gold in the box. And then finally, they all come together for the season. It's one last little drink together. They're all standing around outside the cabin, and they start talking about the season and what they found and what all has happened. Eric goes on to talk about the iridium and talks about how this is what's possibly causing all of these issues with the electronics and the machines, and maybe some of the occurrences happening on the actual property itself. He said that high concentration of iridium can be sometimes very bad for the human, but it can also cause a lot of more electronical issues than what people realize. Then Chad talks about how for the next 6 months, all he'll be able to think about is that box and how he can't wait to go dive back on in and figure out what is going on what is going on inside of that box. Chad and Charlie obviously laugh together, and Dwayne even says that, it was a great season and he can't wait to get back at it next time. And then they end the episode by clinking their little beer bottles together and celebrate the season.
So here's the deal, fellas. It's high risk out here, but the reward is just overwhelming. And no risk, no fun. I hate to admit it, but I'm kind of one of those junkies, and I think I raised one just like me.
And that's where episode 6 ends. It's a beautiful little moment of all 4 guys coming together, talking about what they've done and all the chaos that has ensued with it. I adored season 1. Season 2 gets wilder and crazier, and I'm so stoked to rewatch season 2 as well because I just enjoy it. So, yeah, with all that being said, I hope you all did enjoy watching. If you have seen season 1, let me know down in the comments below. If you've seen season 2, let me know. Do you want to hear more about season 2? Would you like me to recap them? I might still recap them. I might do a little something else beforehand and then recap season 2. But I really want to finish this out strong. Do all 3 seasons. Why not? But with all that being said, I love you all. Stay safe. Have a spooktacular day. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye.